Hey guys, I wanted to share a really cool update in my life. I've recently republished my book, The Shepherd King Breath of the Spirit. I'm super excited about it. I've made a lot of minor changes to my book and a few really major changes. And one of the biggest changes I made is to my book cover. And I'd like to share some of that with y'all right now. You'll notice that I've opted to keep the manga anime art style in the cover this time around, and I've added a little more color to the cover. I've also based this cover off of a painting that I like to call Baller David. This painting was actually named very aptly David with the Head of Goliath. It was painted by a Florentine artist named Domenico Fetti in the 1600s. As a side note, I'm planning on basing every book cover in this series off of a famous artwork of David. I've actually already chosen the pieces of art that I'm going to base the covers for the next two books of the Shepherd King off of. But honestly, this cover was the hardest for me to find a piece of art for. That's because there's so many great depictions of David slaying Goliath out there. I chose this piece because I just love how Fetti depicts David in such a silently confident and victorious way. He looks like the original baby-faced assassin. David's silent confidence is emphasized in part by the camera angle of this painting. The angle forces David to look down on you with a sly smirk that downplays the fact that he just murdered a man more than twice his size. Notice also how Goliath's head is actually looking up and towards David. It's like Fetti is depicting Goliath as still being alive. So while the small shepherd boy looks down on you, the giant's head looks up. It's still animated and very much in shock from his defeat at the hand of the unassuming shepherd. Additionally, David's face is brightly lit up while Goliath is mostly obscured in darkness and defeat. And really importantly, Goliath's mouth is open. This has the effect of making Goliath look like he's still in agony and in disbelief that he was killed by a small shepherd boy. And it also looks like Goliath is like kind of eating the dust, like he's eating dirt here. I think this could be a reference to Genesis 3:16, where God curses the snake to crawl on its belly and eat the dust of the earth. In the biblical account, Goliath is described in snake-like terms because he is said to wear scaly armor in 1 Samuel 18. As a side note, in this book, I've given Goliath a nickname that refers to these snake-like qualities. I've called him the Dragon of Gath in The Shepherd King. So in Fetti's painting, you can just barely see that Goliath's mouth is open and facing the ground. I don't know if Fetti had this illusion in mind when he painted this piece, but it really is a nice detail nonetheless. So back to my book cover. I've taken Fetti's painting and inverted it. Instead of holding Goliath's sword, David now holds his shepherd's staff, a tool used to guide and protect his flock, not cut down and slay his enemies. On the other hand, David is not possessing the head of his enemy, rather he is petting and caressing the head of his sheep. But notice how I've also tried to keep the same silent, confident smirk on David's face. This is meant to convey that David has the same confidence before he fights Goliath as he does after he's slain the giant. In other words, David had that killer instinct and confidence in God even before his victory against Goliath. Additionally, you will notice that I've emphasized an element of wind in my depiction of David. In Fetti's painting, David is more stagnant. However, in my depiction, I wanted to show and emphasize the wind swirling around David. I did this because I wanted to show that David is being filled with the Spirit. This leads me to the next big change in my book. As you may have noticed, I've added the subtitle, Breath of the Spirit. The Hebrew word for spirit is ruach, and it can describe wind, someone's breath, and someone's spirit. So ruach has three different meanings: breath, spirit, and wind. You will notice that I've implemented all three of those meanings in this cover. Breath and spirit are in the title, which, by the way, is a reference to Genesis 2, when God breathes his spirit or his ruach into Adam. And lastly, wind surrounds David in the cover. It seems to create a little vortex around him, actually. I did this to show that David is being filled with and surrounded by the Spirit, so to speak. And that is actually what this book, The Shepherd King, Breath of the Spirit, is all about. It's about all of the events leading up to David being filled with God's Spirit in 1 Samuel 17 and 18. So in addition to the updated title and book cover, I've edited and amended a few parts of my story. I've added in some new charts depicting the gifts of the Spirit, and I've even added a very nerdy fantasy Bible map. So there's a lot of new things in the second edition. I'm so excited for it and very happy with how it turned out. If you want to check out my book, there's a link to it in the description below. And if not, well, I hope you enjoyed my art rant, this nerdy musing about King David. Thanks for listening, guys. I'll see you next time.